Try not to cry. 92-year-old woman walks 5 km every day to feed her sick husband. The sun was still dozing on the horizon when Dona Mercedes opened her eyes for the 1,000th time that year. Her 92 years weighed like mountains on her bent shoulders, but her heart carried an even greater weight, the unconditional love for Joachim, her companion of 70 years of marriage. The house, once vibrant with the laughter of children and grandchildren, now echoed only the sound of the labored breathing of the man with whom she had shared an entire life. Joachim lay in the bed that was once theirs, but which now had become his prison of iron and suffering. The stroke that had struck him 2 years ago had robbed him of speech, movement, and dignity, but never the gaze that still shone with gratitude every morning when he saw the wrinkled face of his beloved. Mercedes got up slowly, each joint protesting the movement. Her bare feet touched the cold floor of the small house on the outskirts of the city, where they had raised 6 children, all now scattered around the world, chasing dreams that took them far from the parents who once rocked them to sleep. "Good morning, my love," she whispered, approaching the bed where Joachim watched her with eyes that spoke more than 1,000 words. She adjusted the pillows behind his head, checked if he was comfortable, and planted a soft kiss on his forehead, which still held the familiar scent of decades. The morning routine followed its sacred course. Mercedes prepared the special porridge that Joachim could swallow with difficulty, fed him patiently spoon by spoon, whispering words of encouragement with each bite. Then she gave him the medicines that cost more than half her meager pension, cleaned him with the care of a mother tending to her first child. Then came the hardest moment of the day. Mercedes looked at the clock on the wall. 7:30 in the morning. She needed to leave. The public hospital where Joachim did physiotherapy was 5 kilometers away, and she had to arrive by 9 to get a spot for care. There was no money for transportation. The children sent help when they could, but life was hard for everyone. "I need to go get your special food at the hospital, my dear," she said, caressing his face. "You know the doctor said that vitamin is important for you to get strong, right?" Joachim tried to move his hand, the only movement he could still make. It was his way of saying, "I love you, and be careful." Mercedes put on her worn shoes, which already knew every stone on the path. She grabbed the old bag where she carried Joachim's ID, a few coins she had managed to save, and a bottle of water. She said goodbye with another kiss and closed the door, not without first making sure he was safe. The walk always began the same way. The first steps were the most painful. Her legs seemed to refuse to move, her knees creaked like old wood, but she knew she couldn't stop. Joachim depended on her. He had always depended on her, just as she had always depended on him. She remembered when they met in 1952. She was only 22, he 25. Joachim was a bricklayer, had strong hands and a smile that lit up any room. He proposed 3 months after their first meeting, in a square where there is now a shopping mall. "Mercedes," he said that day, kneeling on the hard ground, "I don't have much to offer you, but I have a heart that will love you until the last day of my life." She accepted without hesitation, and he kept his promise. Now, decades later, it was her turn to keep hers. The first kilometer was always the hardest. People drove by, rushing to their commitments, without noticing the small, bent figure walking slowly along the sidewalk. Some honked impatiently when she crossed the streets, as if those extra seconds could ruin their lives. Mercedes didn't care. Her mind was far from there, sailing through memories that kept her strong. She remembered when they had their first child, João. Joachim cried more than she did during the birth. Then came Maria, Pedro, Ana, Carlos, and finally Luisa. 6 mouths to feed on a bricklayer's salary. Joachim worked from sunrise to sunset, sometimes at 2 jobs. Mercedes washed clothes for others, sewed late into the night, made sweets to sell at the school gate. There was never a lack of food on the table. There was never a lack of love in that house. In the second kilometer, the pain in her legs intensified. Mercedes stopped under a tree, the same tree as always, and took a sip of water. She took a deep breath and continued. She couldn't give up. Joachim was waiting. She thought of Anna, her middle daughter, who lived in Germany. Anna called every week, always asking if they needed anything, always apologizing for not being able to be there. "Mom, I wish I could take care of you," she said. Her voice choked. "I know, my daughter," Mercedes replied, "but you have your life. We're fine." A merciful lie. They weren't fine, but she didn't want to be a burden to the children who had fought so hard to build their own lives. The third kilometer brought other memories. The time Joachim got sick, 15 years ago, with pneumonia. Mercedes didn't leave his bedside for 3 weeks. She slept in an uncomfortable chair, ate the leftovers of the food he couldn't finish. The doctor said he wouldn't make it, but Mercedes held his hand and whispered, "You can't go yet. We have more stories to live." Joaquim recovered. They had 15 more years together, taking care of each other, watching their grandchildren grow, celebrating every small victory in life. In the 4th kilometer, Mercedes felt her legs trembling. The sun was already high and strong. Sweat ran down her face, but she kept going. She always kept going. She remembered the time Joaquim found a lump in his neck. They were both terrified. They knew too many stories of people who never returned from the hospital after discoveries like that, but it was benign. They cried with relief that night, hugging in bed, promising each other they would enjoy every day. And they did. Even with little money, they found happiness in simple things. A coffee shared on the porch, watching the street, an old song on the radio that made them dance in the living room, the unexpected visits from grandchildren that filled the house with life again. The last kilometer was always the longest. The people at the hospital already knew Mercedes. Some staff even greeted her by name. "Here comes Dona Mercedes," they said, punctual as always. She arrived out of breath, sweaty, with pain all over her body, but with a smile on her face. She queued up to get the special vitamin Joaquim needed, a nutritional supplement the doctor had prescribed to help his recovery. It was distributed free by the hospital, but only to those who arrived early. While waiting in line, Mercedes talked to others in the same situation. Dona Rosa, who came to get insulin for her diabetic husband, Mr. Francisco, who needed heart medicine, all united by the same reality, the love that made them face any difficulty for their loved ones. "Dona Mercedes," a nurse said one morning, "you can't keep making this walk every day. It's too much for someone your age." "Nurse," Mercedes replied with a tired smile, "when you truly love, there's no such thing as too much. There's only what needs to be done." The nurse had no answer for that. After getting the vitamin, Mercedes still had to return. 5 kilometers again, now under the stronger midday sun, but she always returned with something extra in her bag. Sometimes a leftover medicine someone gave her, sometimes a fruit she found along the way, once even a flower she picked to bring to Joaquim. The walk back was different. Mercedes returned with a sense of duty fulfilled, knowing that Joaquim would have what he needed for another day. But she also returned more tired, her legs more sore, her heart divided between love and exhaustion. Halfway back, she always stopped at the same bakery, not to buy, there was no money for that, but to use the bathroom and drink a glass of water that the owner, Mr. Manuel, always offered her for free. "Dona Mercedes," he said one day, "I keep thinking about you, making this walk every day. If you want, I can give you a ride." "Thank you, Mr. Manuel," she replied, "but I need to walk. It's the only thing I can do for my Joaquim." Mr. Manuel didn't fully understand, but he respected her. There was something in the determination of that small woman that inspired reverence. There were hard days, days when Mercedes woke up sick, with a fever, with a headache. But even so, she put on her worn shoes and made the walk. There were days when it rained so much she arrived at the hospital soaked, shivering with cold. There were days when the heat was so intense she had to stop several times, seeking shade, sipping water slowly so as not to get sick. But never, in 2 years, did Mercedes miss a single day. Joaquim noticed her effort. Even without being able to speak, his eyes said it all. When she arrived home exhausted but smiling, he tried to move his hand to thank her. Sometimes Mercedes caught him looking at her with a guilty expression, as if he were a burden. "Don't think that way, my love," she would say, as if she could read his thoughts. "I do this because I want to, because that's what people who love each other do." One night, Mercedes was more tired than usual. She sat in the chair beside Joaquim's bed and began to cry silently, not out of sadness but from a complex mix of love, exhaustion, fear, and gratitude. Joaquim, even with his limitations, managed to slightly turn his head toward her. Their eyes met, and in that moment, decades of love and companionship were communicated without words. "You know, Joaquim," Mercedes said, holding his hand, "sometimes I wonder if I have the strength to go on. My body hurts, my feet are always swollen, my legs tremble, but then I look at you, and I remember everything we've been through. I remember the day we met, the day we got married, the birth of each of our children. I remember you working so hard to give us a decent life. I remember you taking care of me when I had pneumonia, when I broke my leg, when I lost my mother." She paused to breathe, tears streaming freely down her face. "You always took care of me, Joaquim. Now it's my turn to take care of you, and I'll keep walking as many kilometers as necessary, for as many days as God gives me strength." Joaquim managed to squeeze her hand lightly. the most his strength allowed. It was his way of saying he understood, that he was grateful, that he loved her more than ever. The children, when they called, always asked about their parents' health. Mercedes always said everything was fine, that Joaquim was trying hard in physiotherapy, that she was as strong as ever. She didn't mention the daily walks, didn't talk about the pain in her body, didn't tell about the nights she couldn't sleep because she was worried about him. It was Carlos, the youngest son, who found out. He had managed a few days off work and decided to surprise his parents with a visit. He arrived at the house on a Tuesday morning and found only Joaquim. A neighbor explained that Mercedes had left early, as she always does. Carlos waited. When Mercedes got home at 2 in the afternoon, sweaty, exhausted, carrying the bag with Joaquim's supplements, he understood everything. "Mom," he said. His voice choked. "How long have you been doing this?" Mercedes tried to minimize it. "Oh, my son, it's just a little walk. It's good for my health." But Carlos had seen the state she was in. He had seen the marks of exhaustion on her face, the way she leaned against the wall to catch her breath. That night, Carlos called all his siblings. It was a virtual family meeting, each one joining from a different city. For the first time in years, the 6 children united to find a solution. "We can't let our 92-year-old mother walk 10 kilometers a day," said João, the oldest. "But you know her," replied Maria. "If we say she can't, she'll get upset." "What if we hire someone to take her?" suggested Pedro. "With what money?" asked Anna from Germany. "You know I send what I can, but it's not enough to pay for a caregiver or daily transportation." It was Luisa, the youngest, who had the idea. "What if we do a crowdfunding campaign? Tell our parents' story. Show Mom's example of love." At first, everyone hesitated. Exposing the family's intimacy on the internet didn't seem right, but then they thought of Mercedes's silent suffering, the dignity with which she faced each day, the example of unconditional love she represented. Carlos created a page on a social network. He posted a photo of Mercedes and Joaquim on their wedding day 70 years ago, and a current photo of the two. He told the story, the daily walk, the unwavering love, the dedication of a woman who at 92 spared no effort to care for her sick husband. "My mother walks 10 kilometers a day to get medicine for my father," he wrote. "She never asked anyone for help, but we, her children, are asking, not for money, but for sharing. We want people to see that true love still exists." The story spread like wildfire. In 24 hours, the post had been shared thousands of times. People from all over the world began to comment, sharing their own stories of love and family dedication. Journalists got in touch. TV shows wanted to interview Mercedes. But what was most impressive were the offers of practical help. A man from the city offered to take Mercedes to the hospital every day, free of charge. A pharmacy offered to deliver the medicines to her home. A geriatric doctor offered free home consultations for Joaquim. Mercedes was confused by all the attention. "I didn't do anything special," she said. "I just did what any woman would do for the husband she loves." But people understood she had done something extraordinary. At a time when relationships fell apart for trivial reasons, when love seemed increasingly fragile and self-interested, Mercedes represented something pure and true that touched everyone's hearts. The first TV interview was awkward for her. Sitting on the living room sofa with Joaquim beside her in his wheelchair, Mercedes couldn't understand why her story was so special. "Dona Mercedes," the reporter asked, "what motivates you to make this walk every day?" "Love," she answered simply. "When you truly love someone, you'll do anything for that person. But don't you feel tired? Don't you ever want to give up?" Mercedes looked at Joaquim, who watched her with pride in his eyes. "Tired? Yes, I get tired. There are days when my legs hurt so much I can barely get out of bed. But then I look at him and remember everything he's done for me. I remember how he worked his whole life to support us, how he took care of me when I was sick, how he was always a good husband and a good father. So I get up, put on my shoes, and go." The reporter had tears in her eyes. The camera showed Joaquim trying to move his hand, his way of applauding his wife. "And what would you say to people who are watching and are inspired by your story?" Mercedes thought for a moment. "I'd say that true love isn't just saying I love you. It's showing it every day in every possible way. It's being together in sickness and in health as we promised at the altar. It's not giving up on each other, even when things get hard." She held Joaquim's hand. "He and I, we chose to be together 70 years ago, and I choose him again every day with every kilometer I walk." After the interview, Mercedes' life changed completely. The offers of help multiplied. A city transportation company offered to take her to the hospital for free for the rest of her life. A supermarket started delivering monthly groceries to their home. Dozens of people offered to help with Joaquim's medical expenses. But the most important change was emotional. Mercedes discovered she was not alone. She received thousands of messages from people around the world who were going through similar situations. Women caring for sick husbands, children caring for elderly parents, people who found strength in her story to continue their own journeys of love and dedication. Dona Mercedes, wrote a lady from the countryside, I've been caring for my husband with Alzheimer's for 5 years. Some days I think about giving up because he doesn't even recognize me anymore. But your story reminded me that love doesn't need to be recognized to be true. Thank you for showing me what true love is, wrote a young woman. I was thinking about breaking up with my boyfriend because of some difficulties, but now I understand that true love faces difficulties together. Mercedes read each message carefully, sometimes asking Carlos to read aloud when her eyes couldn't keep up with the small words on the phone screen. Joaquim listened too, and his eyes shone with pride for the extraordinary woman he had chosen to share his life with. But not all the attention was positive. Some people questioned why the children didn't take better care of their parents. Others criticized the exposure of the family's story. Mercedes was not shaken by the criticism. People talk about what they don't know, she said in a later interview. My children are good children, each does what they can, and I didn't tell our story to get pity or judgment. I told it to show that true love still exists in the world. The impact of the story went beyond expectations. Schools began to use Mercedes' example to talk about family values. Churches invited her to give testimonies about love and dedication. Senior organizations honored her as an example of active and loving aging. Mercedes attended some events, always accompanied by Joaquim in his wheelchair. Seeing the two together moved entire audiences. There was something in the way she adjusted his blanket, how she spoke to him even knowing he couldn't respond, how her eyes lit up when he managed to smile, that deeply touched people. At one of these talks, a young woman asked, Dona Mercedes, aren't you afraid that after so much care Mr. Joaquim still won't recover? The question caught Mercedes by surprise. She was silent for a few seconds, looking at her husband. My dear, she finally replied, I don't take care of him expecting him to get better. I take care of him because I love him. If he gets better, it will be a blessing. If not, I'll keep caring for him. Love is not a trade. You do this, I do that. Love is giving without expecting anything in return. The audience stood and applauded for several minutes. Months after the first news report, Mercedes was still making her daily walk, but now accompanied. Dozens of people joined her, turning the journey into a community walk. Doctors, students, housewives, retirees, people of all ages who wanted to be part of that daily demonstration of love. At first I was embarrassed, Mercedes admitted. I thought people would get tired and stop coming, but they keep coming. And you know what they tell me? That walking with me reminds them of what's important in life. The walk became a movement. Ang Caminhada do Amor, or Walk of Love, became a hashtag on social media. People in other cities started their own walks, dedicated to their loved ones. Mercedes' example spread around the world. Joaquim, even with his limitations, noticed the change. His eyes reflected a mix of gratitude and admiration for the woman he had chosen to share his life with. In his moments of greatest clarity, he managed to squeeze her hand a little more forcefully, his way of saying he was proud. A year after their story became public, Mercedes received an unexpected call. It was from the city mayor, informing her that she had been chosen to receive the title of honorary citizen in recognition of her example of love and family dedication. I don't deserve this, she said. I just did what any wife would do. Dona Mercedes, replied the mayor, you did what many wives would like to do, but few have the courage and strength to do. You are an example for our city and the world. The award ceremony was moving. Mercedes went on stage holding tightly to Joaquim's hand, who had been brought in his wheelchair. When she received the medal, she asked that it also be placed on Joaquim's chest. This honor is ours, she said at the microphone. Everything I did for both of us. He deserves it as much as I do. The audience stood and applauded for several minutes, but perhaps the most touching moment happened that same night, at home. Mercedes was helping Joaquim get ready for bed when she noticed he was trying to say something. She came closer, put her ear near his mouth. With immense effort, in an almost imperceptible voice, Joaquim managed to whisper 2 words, thank you, love. They were the first words he had been able to say since the stroke. Mercedes cried as she hadn't cried in years, not from sadness, but from a deep and pure joy. Joaquim had spoken again. Even if it was just for a moment, even if it was just 2 words, he had found a way to express his gratitude. I love you too, she whispered back, holding him against her chest as she had done thousands of times over 70 years of marriage. That night, for the first time in a long time, the two slept deeply, embraced like a pair of sweethearts. The story of Mercedes and Joaquim continued to inspire people around the world. Documentaries were made, books were written, Their home became a pilgrimage site for couples who wanted to renew their vows of love. But life, even for those who become symbols of hope, holds surprises and unexpected challenges. In the winter of that year, Mercedes woke up with intense chest pain. She tried to hide it as she always did when something bothered her, but Joachim, even with his limitations, noticed something was wrong. His eyes, which knew every expression on her face better than anyone, reflected concern. "It's nothing, my love," she lied, preparing for another walk. But as she took the first step out of the house, Mercedes felt a strong dizziness and had to lean against the gate. A neighbor, Donna Rosa, who always accompanied her walks, noticed immediately. "Mercedes, you're not well. There will be no walk today." "I need to go," Mercedes insisted, trying to straighten up. "Joachim needs his medicine. I'll get it for you," Donna Rosa said firmly. "You're staying here and resting." It was the first time in 2 years that Mercedes didn't make the walk. Sitting beside Joachim's bed, she held his hand and confessed her fears. "Joachim, I'm afraid. Not of dying. We've lived a long time. I'm afraid of leaving you alone. Who will take care of you if I can't anymore?" Joachim, with immense effort, managed to squeeze her hand. In his eyes, Mercedes saw something that reassured her, a serene acceptance, as if he were saying everything would be fine, that they would face this together, as they always had. Carlos arrived the next day. Alarmed by Donna Rosa's call, he found his mother trying to get up for the walk even though she was clearly unwell. "Mom, you're going to the doctor today," he said, accepting no protests. The test revealed what Mercedes already suspected. Her heart, after 92 years beating strong, was starting to show signs of fatigue. It wasn't immediately dangerous, but required care. "Donna Mercedes," said the cardiologist, "you need to slow down. This daily walk is too intense for your heart." Mercedes looked at him with the same determination she showed every day. "Doctor, if I stop walking, my husband won't have what he needs. But if you don't take care of yourself, something more serious could happen, and then who will take care of him?" The logic was irrefutable, but Mercedes couldn't easily accept it. It was Joachim who, in his silent way, convinced her. That night, when she was torn between following medical advice and continuing her routine, he managed to do something he hadn't done in months. He turned his head completely toward her, and with great effort, shook his head no. He was saying no. No to the walk that was hurting her. He would rather go without the medicine than see the woman he loved hurt herself for his sake. Mercedes understood the message. For the first time in decades, Joachim was taking care of her. The solution came from the community that they had touched with their story. When the news spread that Mercedes needed to cut back on her walks for medical reasons, dozens of people volunteered to make the trip for her. A schedule was organized. Each day a different person would pick up Joachim's medicine. "Donna Mercedes," said a young nurse who volunteered, "you taught us what true love is. Now let us give back a little of that love." Mercedes was moved. She realized that by sharing her love story, she had planted seeds of kindness in hearts around the world. But the adjustment was not easy. In the first days without the walk, Mercedes felt useless. There was a restlessness in her chest, a feeling that she was failing Joachim. It was he who, once again, surprised her. One afternoon when Mercedes was particularly melancholy, sitting beside his bed, Joachim started moving his lips. She came closer, and he managed to whisper something she didn't quite understand. She asked him to repeat. "Thank you for everything," he managed to say, word by word with immense effort. Mercedes cried. It wasn't just the words, but the intention behind them. Joachim was thanking her not just for the care, but for a lifetime of love and dedication. "I thank you, my love," she replied, kissing his forehead, "for letting me love you for so long." Mercedes' recovery was gradual, but during this period something magical happened. With more time at home, she and Joachim developed new ways to connect. Mercedes began to read to him stories from when they were young, letters he had written to her during the early years of their marriage, which she had kept religiously. "Remember this letter, Joachim?" she said one afternoon, unfolding a yellowed piece of paper. "You wrote it when you went to work on that project in another city. You said you were counting the days to come home to me." Joachim smiled, a small but genuine smile. He remembered. Mercedes also began to tell him stories about their children, stories Joachim might no longer remember due to the stroke, but which she told as if they were new, seeing the joy reflected in his eyes. "You know, Joachim, Anna called from Germany yesterday. She said she'll be able to take a vacation next month and come visit us. It's been 3 years since we've seen her in person." Joachim's eyes lit up. Even with his cognitive limitations, his love for his children remained intact. During this recovery period, Mercedes also received a special visit. A writer had been so touched by their story that she wrote a book based on their lives, with the family's permission, of course. She came to personally deliver the first printed copy. Dona Mercedes, the writer said, when I heard your story, I thought of my own grandparents. They also loved each other for decades, but I've never seen anyone express that love as concretely as you. I hope this book helps others understand what true love is. Mercedes leafed through the book, seeing her life turned into words. There were old photos the children had provided, and even some recent ones of her walks. It's strange to see our life written like this, she said. It seems bigger than it really is. Dona Mercedes, replied the writer, sometimes the simplest things are the greatest. You and your Joaquim proved that. When Mercedes read some excerpts from the book to Joaquim, he showed an attention he hadn't shown in months. It was as if, hearing his own story, he reconnected with parts of himself the stroke had obscured. The book became a success. Part of the profits went to a foundation created in the name of Mercedes and Joaquim, dedicated to helping families in similar situations, elderly people caring for sick spouses without enough resources. I never imagined our story could help so many people, Mercedes said in an interview about the book. We were just living our lives, loving each other the best way we knew how. Months after her heart scare, Mercedes returned to walking, but now shorter walks, always accompanied. 2 kilometers a day, not the previous 10, and always with Joaquim, who now left the house in his wheelchair. It's different now, she explained to a reporter. Before, I walked for him. Now we walk together, each at our own pace, but together. Joaquim, even limited to the wheelchair, seemed to rejuvenate during these outings. He saw people, felt the sun, heard the sounds of the city he had helped build with his work as a bricklayer decades earlier. During one of these walks, something extraordinary happened. A young mother approached them in the park. Sorry to bother you, she said, but you're Mercedes and Joaquim, aren't you? Your story saved my marriage. Mercedes was surprised. How so, dear? I was about to separate from my husband. I thought I didn't love him anymore, that it was better to give up. But when I saw your story, I understood that love is not just a feeling. It's a choice. It's care. It's being together even when it's hard. We decided to try again, and today, we're better than ever. The young woman bent down and kissed Mercedes's hand, then Joaquim's. Thank you for showing us what true love is. When the young woman walked away, Mercedes looked at Joaquim and saw tears in his eyes. They were tears of gratitude. Gratitude for discovering that their love story was helping others find their own. As the months passed, Joaquim showed small signs of improvement. Not a full recovery, that would never happen, but small progress that filled Mercedes with hope. He could sit for longer periods. His words, though rare, became clearer, and his movements, though limited, were more coordinated. The doctor said it's because of love, Mercedes told the children in a video call. He said when a person feels loved and cared for, the body responds better to treatment. There's a name for that in medicine, Mom, said João. They call it the love effect. People who feel loved recover faster from illness. I always knew that, Mercedes replied, smiling. I didn't need a doctor to tell me. On the first anniversary of the interview that had made their story public, Mercedes and Joaquim received hundreds of letters and messages from around the world, people sharing their own love stories, thanking them for the inspiration, telling how their story had changed their lives. One letter in particular touched Mercedes deeply. It was from a 45-year-old woman caring for her mother with Alzheimer's. Dona Mercedes, there are days when I wake up without the strength to care for my mother. She doesn't recognize me anymore. Sometimes she gets aggressive. She can't do anything alone. I feel exhausted and guilty for feeling this way. But then I remember you, walking 10 kilometers at 92, and I find the strength to go on. You taught me that love isn't easy, but it's necessary. Thank you for existing. Mercedes asked Carlos to write a reply to this woman. My dear daughter, love is indeed hard sometimes. There are days when we want to give up, when it seems we have no more strength, but it's precisely on those days that our love proves true. Your mother may not remember you, but her heart does. Keep caring for her. God will give you strength. A hug from a mother who understands your struggle. The response sparked a new wave of emotion on social media. Mercedes, without fully realizing it, had become a kind of spiritual counselor for people around the world facing similar situations. On the second anniversary of Joaquim's stroke, the doctors did a full evaluation. Although the limitations remained, they were impressed with his overall condition. Frankly, said the neurologist, considering the severity of the stroke and the patient's age, he's much better than we expected, and we know it's due to the exceptional care he receives. Mercedes, who was present at the appointment, held Joaquim's hand. Doctor, we didn't do anything special. We just took care of each other, as we always have. Dona Mercedes, replied the doctor, you did something extraordinary. You proved that love is perhaps the best medicine there is. That night, back home, Mercedes helped Joaquim get ready for bed. It was a routine she knew by heart. Help with hygiene, give the medicines, make him comfortable in bed, check if he was warm. But that night, as she adjusted the pillows, Joaquim held her hand more tightly than he had in a long time. Mercedes, he said clearly. It was the first time he had said her name since the stroke. Yes, my love, I'm here, she replied, tears in her eyes. I love you, he managed to say, word by word, as if each cost him immense effort. Mercedes couldn't respond immediately. Tears streamed freely down her face. After so many months hearing those words only in her memory, hearing them again was like a miracle. I love you too, Joaquim. I've always loved you. I always will. They stayed like that for a few minutes, holding hands in silence, but saying everything through their gaze. That same week, Mercedes received a phone call that left her emotional. It was from the mayor, informing her that the street where they lived would be renamed Rua do Amor Eterno Mercedes e Joaquim. Mercedes and Joaquim Eternal Love Street. It's a way for the city to honor you permanently, explained the mayor, so that future generations know that here lived a couple who taught us the true meaning of love. The ceremony to inaugurate the new street sign was moving. Hundreds of people attended, including all of Mercedes and Joaquim's children, who managed to gather for the first time in years. Mercedes, beside Joaquim in his wheelchair, looked at the new sign and then at her husband. Look, my love, she said, our street has our name now. Who would have thought that two old folks like us would one day have a street with our name? Joaquim smiled, a broad, clear smile that everyone could see. But for Mercedes, none of that mattered as much as waking up every morning and seeing Joaquim looking at her with the same love as always. Nothing mattered as much as the daily walk, now shorter, accompanied by friends, but still motivated by the same pure feeling that made her get out of bed every day. In her own words, in one of the last interviews she gave, people ask me what the secret is to a love that lasts 70 years. I say there's no secret, there's a choice. Every day you wake up and choose to love. In difficulties, in health, in sickness, in joy, in sadness, you simply choose to love. And so at 92, Mercedes kept choosing love, with every step of her daily walk, with every care given to Joaquim, with every word whispered in his ear. She reaffirmed a simple but profound truth. True love has no age, no limits, knows no obstacles. It is eternal, like the walk she made every day, destined for the hospital but originating in the heart, a heart that had learned that loving is not just a feeling, but an action, a daily choice, a walk that lasts a lifetime. And Mercedes walked, every day, at 92, now accompanied by the man she loved, each at their own pace but together, for the love she chose to live.